So I want to welcome you all to the Awkward Sports Podcast. I'm Harrison. That's Josh, and I'm going to cut to the chase. Josh, I am left perplexed by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They do
Yeah,
not seem like they are closing in on a deal with Mike Evans. A lot of hopes that maybe he would find a way to stay in the end. It's not looking great. They choose to franchise tag Antoine Winfield, maybe kick that can down the road, and I guess it looks like they're going to try to prioritize Baker Mayfield after the one season. I'm just kind of speculating there, but it does seem that's the case as we recall, he was involved in choosing the next offensive coordinator, which means the idea is he is in the long-term plans. It's look, I would understand if it looked like some big name quarterback was trying to stay here in Tampa. But remember, this is Baker Mayfield, and the two players that the Buccaneers risk losing this season and potentially after that are Mike Evans, uh, arguably the greatest offensive player in the history of this team, and Antoine Winfield, one of the best players in the backfield since Rondé Barber. Does it just feel like the priorities are a little out of whack?
yeah. And the thing is, if you're a Bucs fan, it is kind of frustrating because it's all unfolding right now. Like this isn't something you want to look back on and be like, if only the Bucs had made these other decisions, right? Like we talk about infamous trades or infamous decisions to let players go in history. Like, well, what if this team had held on to a certain player? Those things can't be done. About like that's the past. This is happening all right now.
In the
We're
moment.
you just wish you could be in the room to be like, what are we doing here? Listen, I understand that the quarterback position in football is by far and away the most important position on the field. I get that. You need a quarterback to win. But you not only need a quarterback to win, you need a special quarterback to win. Patrick Mahomes has shown you that special wins these big games and special wins use these Super Bowls. And when it comes to some of the free agents that Tampa has, there's obviously a number of them. But to me, the three big ones, obviously, that have been the topic of discussion, maybe not the most important, but the three topic of discussion free agents for Tampa are Baker Mayfield, Antoine Winfield Jr., and Mike Evans. And I'm sorry, Baker Mayfield is a fine quarterback. And Tampa lost their offensive coordinator in Canales. And we don't know how they're going to look with Liam Cohen as their new OC. We don't know what that's going to look like yet. What we do know is that Antoine Winfield Jr. is a first team All Pro and building a Hall of Fame resume early. And we do know that Mike Evans gets 1,000 yards every year and is also probably on his way to making the Hall of Fame if he continues to keep this up. Again, the reason why I say probably is because the Hall of Fame is very harsh on receivers. With all that being said, they're looking at the wrong guy right now. Why are they franchise tagging Antoine Winfield? Because I get it. That doesn't mean he's going to necessarily leave next year or whatever, but like he just made first team all pro. You want to keep these guys happy. You want to keep these special players happy. And I just feel like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers kind of slighted Winfield. And now this also opens the door for Mike Evans to go somewhere else because they did not want to extend him by the deadline.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Like, look, I know there's all those ideas out there. Like, who knows? Mike Evans could just go home to Houston, team up with CJ Stroud, which, by the way, would be fantastic for Stroud. I'd be very happy for him individually. But sometimes you just have to, even if the Super Bowl's already been won, you just gotta look and think, wouldn't it be great if some of these guys only wore a single jersey and it's the one he's currently wearing? I mean, that's kind of being redundant there, but you kind of get what I'm getting at. I don't get it. I
Yeah,
kind of, oh, here's what I will say. I kind of understand at this point the odds of Mike Evans staying was on the lower side because a deadline that happened during the season had passed. The Winfield one makes no sense to me. Like a franchise tag. Like usually you do that stuff when you're just trying to have him an extra year or so before you let him go off on the market. When you really want to have your guy, you don't just franchise tag him, you just give him the extension.
Yeah,
If I'm Antoine Winfield, I'm a little stunned that I'm franchise tag. You're telling me that they don't just want to offer me another like 4 or 5 year deal and see where things go when I'm on the other end of 30?
yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. If this was like one of those talk shows like Around the Horn, I'd be giving you those points right now with the arrow clicker. No, but I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, that one did surprise me. I thought, okay, let's just say hypothetically, out of those three guys, you can only afford two. Obviously, if it was me, I would want to keep Mike Evans and Antoine Winfield Jr. But let's just say I can understand it if it's like, hey, we gotta keep the quarterback. We don't like the quarterback class this year. We wanna keep moving Baker Mayfield down the road and stick with him for a longer term. But it's like also recognizing the other players that you have, where it's like, okay, Mike Evans, he's been great. There's receivers in the draft we can find. Antoine Winfield Jr., you would have just thought would have been a lock to get a long term deal this offseason. And now it looks like he's going to be playing on the franchise tag like some of these running backs do. And it really shocks me um, that was the route that the Buccaneers have taken. I maybe they're still trying to find a way to keep all three. Maybe that's a way to do it, but like they're now going to have to spend more against the salary cap to keep Mike Evans because they missed the deadline there. Again, they can still bring him in. But one of the other possible destinations, as we pivot, but we stay on the topic of Mike Evans, is some of the potential destinations where he might end up. And you talked about the Houston Texans as being one of those destinations. Obviously, he played college football at Texas A&M. The Texans are an up-and-coming team. Stroud looks like the real deal. That would be a great landing spot. But the one that I've also heard is Kansas City, with the money they have in their salary cap in order to make it work, that he might end up being a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. And obviously, if you're Mike Evans and you've won a Super Bowl, but you've also had a lot of losing seasons, that might be an attractive destination. You played with Tom Brady, now you may have the opportunity to play with Patrick Mahomes. There could be a side of this where Mike Evans, maybe behind closed doors, is like, I just really want to test free agency and go elsewhere. And like, if you
That
want me
could be
so
it
much,
too.
you have to pay me a lot. But like, that's an attractive destination as well. I'm thinking, like, if I was Mike Evans, why wouldn't you want to play with a guy like Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City,
Especially
especially when
because imagine like they don't have a lot of receiving options right now. They really, you could argue they have one. So if you go and you add Mike Evans into the mix, they're look and remember again, this is a team looking to be the first three-peat in Super Bowl history. The closest there is when Bart Starr and Lombardi won the NFL championship and then the first two Super Bowls. Still, nothing to scoff at there. Oh no, still three championships in a row back when the Super Bowl was not really seen as this bigger thing. But if you're a team looking to three-peat, you're probably going to need more than one receiving option, and Mike Evans is probably the best option on the market to go do that. And remember, Evans is a guy who racks up 1,000 yards every year, regardless of who his quarterback is, whether it's Jameis Winston, Tom Brady, Baker Mayfield, Mike Glennon, or Josh McCown. Add Patrick Mahomes into the mix, and it's going to be very fun.
Yeah, and I think we'll see a lot of winning with that for sure, regardless of what happens there with Kansas City and the possibility of adding Mike Evans. But switching over, obviously, Florida Gators football season is over, but we have other spring sports, winter and spring
Yes, we
sports that
do.
are just going on here for the Gators. And mainly Gator basketball making the headlines this week, being ranked for the first time this season, 24th in the country. Florida basketball actually has a shot to win the SEC regular season championship. There is a path there. They play Alabama twice before the regular season comes to a close. They're 2 games out from where Bama currently sits atop of the SEC standings. Now, remember, it's based on just record in conference for the regular season title, not overall record. So it just those out of conference losses don't factor into that. So that's why Florida has a chance there. Plus, if you look at Bama, Tennessee, a few of those teams that Florida is looking up against, Alabama has to play those teams. They have to play Auburn. They have to play Tennessee. And Florida's sitting there in that 4 spot, kind of tied with Kentucky. And they've split their season series, and they have apparently a tiebreaker over Kentucky as it stands right now. So that to me has been pretty impressive. is this team for real? Well, that we will find that out for sure down the stretch of this regular season. What this team can do, then going into the conference tournament, I think this team has a chance. It could be a team that we look back on in a couple of years and be like, this was one of the better Florida basketball teams and throughout their history. I mean, they have a chance to write their own legacy with guys like Walter Clayton Jr., a transfer, Zion Poland, who's played, it seemed like an ungodly amount of games. He was also a transfer. Those guys have been key all year long for the Gators. And now they had this surprise performance from a freshman named Thomas Howe, which nobody has really heard of up to this point in the season. He had a breakout game as a freshman against Georgia. And many people are wondering now if this team is deeper than we all originally thought. And are they coming together? I think they got a good shot. They have a manageable schedule down the stretch where other teams have tougher ones. But again, it's February. We go into March. Looks like Florida's going to be a lock for the tournament, regardless of what happens. So that's going to be a +2. They'll have a chance to kind of show what they're made of at home, on the road, and in neutral site games. So Harrison, for me, for Florida basketball, this team really has a chance to do something special. Will they? That remains to be seen. Again, big matchup upcoming here against Bama, but a lot of experienced players on this roster, some transfers that have played a lot of games, mixed in with some freshmen who have something to prove and now are starting to stand out as the season have gone on.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. This Gator team is definitely looking very for real. Like you said before, it's going to take probably getting into the tournament, seeing how far they can go to show that. But that's a very key thing to point out too with how real this Gator team is. We're debating how far they can get into the tournament. That's the storyline now. Up until last season, for the last couple of years, the question was, will they make the tournament at all? Todd Golden has really done a lot just in year 2 alone to make things great. They're on a great run too, just in SEC play. They've won 7 of their last 8. If it wasn't for blowing a lead to A&M, they would have won 8 in a row, and they'd probably be ranked a bit higher than number 24 in the country.
Yeah, it's crazy how 2 losses can change perspective, right? They had the 1-point loss to A&M, which was tough, and they had this game earlier on in the season where they got destroyed by Ole Miss, who has now kind of fallen off the wayside in the SEC, not really the team that they were to start the year. So, I mean, it's crazy how those 2 losses can change things. But that's the beautiful thing about college basketball is that once the regular season is over, you enter conference tournament play, and you're basically on a clean slate. You start playing your best ball in March, anything can happen.
Anything can happen. Look, what's nice for them too, I want to point out, they're playing Alabama tomorrow. They have both games against Alabama ahead. You win at least one of those, you get to about 22 wins on the season. You put yourself in a great position to go on a run in the SEC tournament. You win a couple of games there, you get a good seed in the main dance. I think I saw in the bracketology they're projected to be an 8th seed, which would be a good return to March Madness for the Gators. Would that be the case?
Absolutely. And it also should be noted the last time the Gators made the Elite Eight, they had, I believe,
2016.
they had, I believe, 7 regular season losses. Ended up with 9 total losses throughout the conference, 1 for the conference tournament and 1 for the actual tournament. But that's where Florida sits right now with 7 losses. So who knows? I mean, again, a lot of experience. And I know, and I think right now a lot of people are sleeping on them. But the biggest question for them, we know they can play well at home. We've seen them beat Auburn. We've seen them beat Kentucky at home. Can they start winning some of those games on the road? Well, they're going to have some chances down the stretch. And can they win some of those games in neutral site locations? We'll find out very soon.
Indeed. But hey, you mentioned they're at 7 losses right now. I have to imagine if they go on a tear the rest of the season, you put yourself in position to not just be an 8th seed in the tournament, you're probably at least a 5th, or maybe you can argue a 4th seed if you run the table in your conference.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen through some of the brackets that have come out, I've seen, yeah, if they keep going, they can get to a 5 or 6, maybe even a 4 if they win out. Like if they somehow, which I don't see them winning out, but I do think that it'll be they definitely have a chance to cement their legacy and put their mark on this season for sure.
I have to agree. It would be very exciting to see. Just and in the end, just shout out to Todd Golden as well. Just want to get back to look, last year the whole impressive thing was he went undefeated against first-time coaches, and now he's beating a bunch of top quartile teams.
Yeah, undefeated.
It's a huge improvement.
Absolutely. Yeah. Undefeated against first time coaches in the SEC. And then this year it was at the beginning Well, they're looking for their first quad one win. They got one, they got another one. Now they're starting to put things together. And that's all you can really ask for from a team. You just see the growth throughout the team in the season. And maybe that will translate over now as they've kind of gotten closer as a team and gotten more familiar with each other's games.
And March Madness is very close, so we'll see what happens. But staying in spring sports, the other sport that starts with BAS, instead of basketball, we're going to baseball. Their season, Gator Baseball, is just underway. They're looking to improve. Not much further you can do that, but they can still. They were a win away from winning their second ever national title in Omaha. They lost to rival LSU, another very good baseball program in the SEC. They're coming off a loss to St. John's in their very first game of the year. It's supposed to be one of those throwaway series to get your feet wet. They didn't look too great in that first game. I'm going to be that guy who just goes out on the whim and says, everybody just breathe. If you're already panicking from that game, there's no reason to be that concerned just yet. One-off game. You have guys like Kate Fisher, who were not starting pitchers last year, who were thrown in the opening day starter role, pitched only 2 innings, gave up 5 earned runs. You know what? That's fine. As long as he shows progress over the season, I have to imagine he'll probably be one of the starters going forward. If he's pitching in a weekend game, it'll be good. And right now, we're recording an episode in the middle of them playing UNF in Jacksonville. They've gone up there. They're currently leading 4-0. And one pitcher that's really impressing me here, and look, if the Gators are going to be successful, it all comes down to, do they have those 2 or 3 arms in the rotation, like when they had Brady Singer, Jackson Kolar, Alex Faedo, those guys who went and took them to Omaha and won them all. Liam Peterson is making his college debut as we're recording this episode, and he struck out the side in the first inning he ever pitched in college. UNF is not a bad team. In striking out the side in general is tough to do. You don't see guys really doing that day in and day out. He's got some good stuff. If he's pitching like this most of the season, I'm not expecting him to go and pitch no hitters every night or have 15 strikeouts a game. You go in there, you pitch, let's say 7 innings, you keep giving up consistently only 2 or 3 runs. Again, I am not going to use a strikeout as a gauge because that doesn't necessarily determine how good you are as a pitcher. I just want to see consistency out of him, limiting runs, and the Gators should be in very good shape. They have another guy who transferred in, Colby Shelton, looked really good in his debut. He had 2 hits, including a home run. That was his lone RBI as well. He's transferred from Alabama, and he looks pretty good. I think, Josh, this Gator team looks just fine.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned Colby Shelton because I think a lot of people were talking about him. He was kind of the buzz early in that first game against St. John's. I don't think it's time to panic on Gator baseball just yet, unless we're talking about can they play games, because it seems to rain every single day.
Well, that's why they call it Rainsville. For those who are familiar with Gainesville culture, a nickname is Rainsville because this happens.
Yeah, so that should be noted too, that they did lose their opener against St. John's. They were supposed to have a series against them, and the other 2 games just were canceled, which obviously is tough when you're a team that's just starting a season. You come off a loss, you want to get that bad taste out of your mouth as soon as you can, and you don't have a chance to kind of go back out there and kind of clean the slate. Now, like you mentioned, they were playing University of North Florida, and again, that should be a nice game for them to settle in. And again, really, it's baseball. There's a lot of games during the season. Conference play still ahead. So it's like that's really when the tests come, because we talk about how good the SEC is in football. The SEC in baseball is somehow even on another level than the SEC.
Oh, yeah. Like if you think SEC football means more, imagine how it is in baseball.
With the additions of Texas too, and Oklahoma perhaps too.
Oh, so man, dude, Texas baseball and the SEC is going to be something else.
Feels like every year in baseball, like you just look at the top 25, you look at, let's just say the top 15.
It feels like 10 or 11 SEC teams.
Which is nuts. That's just crazy. Like you
remember, there's 14, soon 16 schools in this entire conference, and a good chunk of them are ranked.
Yeah, and you could be like eighth in the SEC and be like 12th in the country. Like, what's going on? Like, why does that that makes no sense? But that's just how good the
Well, I
SEC
mean,
is.
when you think about it, look at where a lot of the players come out of that eventually go into Major League Baseball. Where are some of the hottest beds for baseball talent? Florida,
Central Florida too.
Texas,
From yeah.
Florida, Texas, Georgia, California. Three of those states have SEC schools. Even before the addition of Texas, you have A&M, you have UGA, you have UF. These are big powerhouse states. And then everyone around in the Southeast is just poaching out of those schools for who's left. And you still have plenty of talent to go around, even after high school players get drafted.
Yeah, I mean, if that doesn't say it all, I believe last year's College World Series, obviously being Florida and LSU, two SEC teams, and I think the year before that it was Ole Miss,
Yeah, Ole
Mississippi,
Miss surprised everyone, won it all.
and beat Mississippi State, right? And that was another
No,
SEC.
that was when Mississippi State played Vanderbilt, who's also in the SEC the year before that.
Like when Vanderbilt is a powerhouse in the SEC, like that's just another level of
Oh yeah,
dominance.
no, they probably arguably have the most storied baseball program of
Yeah.
any of the SEC schools. Like so many major league players have come out of Vanderbilt's.
Yeah. And it also should be noted with the Gator baseball team. Obviously, last year they got so close. But again, every year, you add new players, you lose players. And like they're gonna have to replace Hurston Waldrop and Wyatt Langford. Those were two big time players
My
for
God, Wyatt Langford going fourth overall in the draft says it all, by the way.
yeah, and Waldrop was, I would argue, last season the most consistent, dominant pitcher that Florida had. So they have to replace him. I know Caglione was a nice two-way player, which in college you don't
Yeah,
see.
we haven't even gotten to Caglione, by the way. Also, I just want to point out Brandon Sproat's gone too, and he had been a consistent arm for the Gators for about 4 years.
Mhm,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Caglione, all SEC preseason team, first team for his bat, second team for his arm.
Yeah,
He's
that's
getting acknowledged both ways. He's a college Otani right now. And the
yeah, they
fact that
call him
he's
Jack
staying
Tom.
on, if he plays another year, two after this, depending on his draft stock, because once you get past the 2 or 3 year mark, these guys are going to start looking to go pro. It's going to be interesting what this Gator team can do if they can keep a consistent core together.
Yeah, and they like you said, like they call him Jack Tawny in Gainesville. And I think it's funny that you talked about Rainsville, and it's like how often it rains basically everywhere down in Florida. I know another news in sports, the Daytona 500 was obviously postponed from Sunday to Monday because of the rain over in Daytona. It just rains there all the time. There was someone that made like this cool graphic years ago, like a Rainsville, Florida basketball jersey. I think Florida should
Oh, that
consider that.
would be
That I would buy.
sick.
That I would buy. The rains like it works, especially basketball. Raining in threes, like that is something they should take and run with. So,
It should. Like if college teams had those third jerseys the way that NBA teams did too,
oh yeah,
I mean, not that they don't do like crazy jerseys from time to time. Like, look, I mean, the Gator football team is known for that scale jersey and their loss to A&M back in 2017. They
well,
experiment.
yeah. I will say this: I respect the effort to try something new in certain circumstances. But here's what since we're on the jersey discussion, because I love talking about uniforms. I don't care what
Oh, I
sport.
know you do.
It's
Well, I'm surprised we
phenomenal.
haven't done it yet on a
Yeah.
podcast like
I
this.
have I have my way about how I think things should be done. Florida basketball, it seems like it's a crisis almost every other couple of years. They change the uniform. They don't really have like a true identity there. The baseball ones, I am a big fan of the script. I am a big fan of the script ones that look like the Dodgers. It's like it says Florida across the chest. It's all white, and then the numbers a different color. I think it's orange as opposed to the word mark is blue. Very Dodger like. As opposed to obviously they have some pinstripe ones, which is more like New York Mets esque, type feel to it.
Which is fitting because Pete Alonso went to the Mets.
Yeah, and those are all right. I prefer for Florida more the Dodger look than the Mets look, but
Now,
still,
one
personally,
jersey I still want to give a shout out to that black jersey that they wear, sometimes
yeah,
alongside the pinstripe pants, just with the block Florida logo across it.
keep
That
that.
never fails.
Yeah,
Never
keep that. Yeah,
fails.
wear that one at like Friday, make that like the Friday night threads. Those ones look like the Rays design with like the trim around the buttons.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're going for. The piping
Yeah.
across, except instead of it being, blue on blue. It's, orange on black, or I think it's orange on black. I might be misremembering. I own the jersey.
They're phenomenal.
They
It's a
are.
phenomenal piece of work. So football, they just have the classic ones. My only nitpicky thing I would do with the football ones, and this is the homer in the classic in me, is but like bring back the old block numbers that we saw in the Tebow era. I don't know what these giant numbers are. Like it makes all I think about when I think of is just the losing that we've done. Like bring us back to those. Everything else
Okay,
though
but also
out the
they
same.
gotta protect those uniforms. The second the Gators bring those back and they don't do well in them, maybe
Yeah,
wait till but until either Napier gets something going or the next head coach comes in before trying it. Well, actually, I would love to see more of the 60s uniforms. They wore them for homecoming back in 2019. The Spurrier-esque, you put the white stripes on the shoulders. You have just a big F with the circle around it. If they
yeah,
wore that more often, I would be such a fan. I'd
those
be
are great.
such a fan.
Those are great, and it should be noted those actually have the block numbers on it. They don't have those
They
little nine.
do.
They don't have the
Well, yeah, because
obnoxious.
the
Those
block
were
numbers
sharp.
were around until very recently.
Those were sharp. Those were really sharp. But yeah, I could go on all day about jerseys. One thing I wanted to do very quickly while we're still on this is I wanted to shout out Anything Flies podcast. Thank you guys for having me on. If you guys that are all listening out there want to take a trip down memory lane and see what it's like to hear your high school lunch table talk sports again, that is where you would go. Anything Flies podcast. Those guys do a pretty good job over there, and they had me on, so I wanted to give them a special shout out as well.
Absolutely. If any of them want to come on our podcast at any time, you guys are all have an open invite. Join Josh and I. We'll pick a couple topics and we'll do our thing. Let us know. But until then, everybody, thank you again for listening to this episode or watching to the Awkward Sports Media Podcast. I'm Josh. That's Harrison. I said it that way on purpose. I have to. It's tradition.
We do it all the time now.
Bucs and Gators talk continues with the next episode. But until then, we will see you next time.